To Kill a Mockingbird, Chapter 5, Reader's Digest version. As a note, there are racial slurs present in the text. I will not be reading them, but they are in the text. Thomas Robinson reached around, ran his fingers under his left arm, and lifted it. He had to guide his arm to the Bible. As he raised his right hand, the useless one slipped off the black binding. He was trying again when Judge Taylor growled, "That'll do, Tom." Tom took the oath and stepped into the witness chair. Atticus quickly induced him to tell us that he was 25 years of age. He was married with 3 children. He had once received 30 days for disorderly conduct. "What did the disorderly conduct consist of?" asked Atticus. "Got in a fight with another man. He tried to cut me." "Did he succeed?" "Yes, sir. You see, Tom moved his left shoulder. "Yes," said Atticus. "You were both convicted?" "Yes, sir. I had to serve because I couldn't pay the fine. Other fellow paid his'n." Dill leaned across me and asked what Atticus was doing. Jim said Atticus was showing the jury that Tom had nothing to hide. "Were you acquainted with Mayella Violet Ewell?" asked Atticus. "Yes, sir. I had to pass her place going to and from the field every day. I picked for Mr. Link Diaz." "Were you picking cotton in November?" "No, sir. I worked on his pecan tree and things, fall and winter time. I worked pretty steady for him all year round." "Tom, you say you had to pass the Ewell place to get to and from work. Did Miss Mayella Ewell ever speak to you?" "Why, yes, sir. I'd tip my hat when I'd go by, and one day she asked me to come inside the fence and bust up a chifferobe for her." "When did she ask you to chop up the chifferobe?" "Mr. Finch, it was way last spring. I remember because it was chopping time and I had my hoe with me. I said I didn't have nothing but this hoe, and she gave me a hatchet, and I broke up the chifferobe. She said, 'I reckon I'll have to give you a nickel now, won't I?' And I said, 'No, ma'am, there ain't no charge.' Then I went home. Mr. Finch, that was spring, over a year ago." "Did you ever go on the place again?" "Yes, sir. I went lots of times." Judge Taylor instinctively reached for his gavel, but the murmur below us died without his help. "Why did you go inside the fence lots of times?" "She'd call me in, sir. Seemed like every time I passed by she'd have some little something for me to do. Chopping kindling, toting water. She watered them red flowers every day." "Were you paid for your services?" "No, sir. Not after she offered me a nickel the first time. I was glad to do it. Mr. Ewell didn't seem to help her none, and neither did the chillun, and I knowed she didn't have no nickels to spare." "Where were the other children?" "They was always around, all over the place. They'd watch me work, some of 'em set in the window." "Would Miss Mayella talk to you?" "Yes, sir, she talked to me." As Tom Robinson gave his testimony, it came to me that Mayella Ewell must be the loneliest person in the world, even lonelier than Boo Radley. White people wouldn't have anything to do with her because she lived among pigs. Negroes wouldn't have anything to do with her because she was white. Tom Robinson was probably the only person who was ever decent to her. "Did you ever," Atticus said, "at any time, set foot on the Ewell property without an express invitation from one of them?" "No, sir, Mr. Finch, I never did." Atticus sometimes said that one way to tell whether a witness was lying or telling the truth was to listen rather than watch. Tom's denials were quiet, with no hint of whining. I found myself believing him. He seemed a respectable Negro, and a respectable Negro would never go into somebody's yard of his own volition. "Tom, what happened to you on the evening of November 21st of last year?" Below us, the spectators drew a collective breath and leaned forward. Behind us, the Negroes did the same. Tom Robinson was a black velvet Negro. The whites of his eyes shone in his face, and when he spoke, we saw flashes of his teeth. If his arm had not been crippled, he would have been a fine specimen of a man. "Mr. Finch," he said, "I was going home as usual that evening, and when I passed the Ewell place, Miss Mayella were on the porch. It seemed real quiet-like, and I was studying why, just passing by, when she says for me to come help her a minute. Well, I went inside the fence, and she says, 'I got something for you to do in the house. The old door's off its hinges.' Well, I went in the front room and looked at the door. I said, Miss Mayella, the store look all right. I pulled it back and forth, and those hinges was all right. Then she shut the door. Mr. Finch, I was wondering why it was so quiet like, and it come to me that there weren't a child on the place. Tom's skin had begun to shine, and he ran his hand over his face. I said, Miss Mayella, where the chillun? He continued, and she says, laughing sort of, she says, they all gone to town to get ice creams. She says, took me a slap year to save 7 nickels, but I done it. They all gone to town. What did you say then, Tom? Asked Atticus. I said something like, why, Miss Mayella, that's right nice of you to treat 'em. Then I said, I best be going. I couldn't do nothing for her. And she says, oh, yes, I could, just to step on that chair yonder and get that box down from on top of the chifforobe. Not the same chifforobe you busted up? Asked Atticus. The witness smiled. No, sir, another one. Most as tall as the room. So I done what she told me, and I was just reaching when the next thing I knows she grabbed me round the legs. She scared me so bad I hopped down and turned the chair over. That was the only furniture disturbed in that room, Mr. Finch, when I left it. I swear 'fore God. What happened when you turned the chair over? Tom Robinson had come to a dead stop. He glanced at Atticus, then at the jury, then across the room at Mr. Underwood. Answer the question, said Judge Taylor. Mr. Finch, I got down off of that chair and turned around, and she sort of jumped on me. Jumped on you? Violently? Said Atticus. No, sir, she hugged me. She hugged me round the waist. Judge Taylor's gavel came down with a bang to restore order. Then what did she do? The witness swallowed hard. She reached up and kissed me side of the face. She says she never kissed a grown man before, and she might as well kiss a black man. She says, kiss me back. I said, Miss Mayella, let me out of here. But she got her back to the door. I didn't want to harm her, Mr. Finch, and I said, let me pass. But just when I said it, Mr. Ewell yonder hollered through the window. What did he say? Tom Robinson swallowed again, and his eyes widened. Something not fitting for these folks in Chillun to hear. Tom, you must tell the jury what he said. Tom shut his eyes tight. He says, you goddamn whore, I'll kill ya. Then what happened? Mr. Finch, I was running so fast I didn't know what happened. Tom, did you harm Mayella Ewell in any way? I did not, sir. Did you resist her advances? Mr. Finch, I tried. I tried without being ugly to her. I didn't want to push her or nothing. Later, I understood the subtlety of Tom's predicament. He would not have dared strike a white woman under any circumstances, so he took the first opportunity to run, a sure sign of guilt. Tom, go back once more to Mr. Ewell, said Atticus. Did he say anything to you? Not anything, sir. He were talking to Miss Mayella. Then you ran. I sure did, sir. I was scared. Why were you scared? Mr. Finch, if you were black like me, you'd be scared too. Atticus sat down. Mr. Gilmer was making his way to the witness stand, but before he got there, Mr. Link Diaz rose from the audience and announced, I just want the whole lot of you to know one thing. That boy's worked for me for 8 years, and I ain't had a speck of trouble out of him. Not a speck. Shut your mouth, sir. Judge Taylor was wide awake and roaring. Link Diaz, if you have anything you want to say, you can say it under oath at the proper time, but until then you get out of this room, you hear me? Looking daggers, Judge Taylor told the jury to disregard the interruption. He waited for Mr. Link Diaz to depart. Then he said, Go ahead, Mr. Gilmer. You were given 30 days once for disorderly conduct, Robinson? Asked Mr. Gilmer. Yes, sir. What did the other man look like when you got through with him? He beat me, Mr. Gilmer. Yes, boy, but you were convicted, weren't you? Yes, sir. I got 30 days. Robinson, you're pretty good at busting up chifforobes and kindling with one hand, aren't you? Gilmer went on. Yes, sir, I reckon so. Strong enough to choke the breath out of a woman and sling her to the floor? I've never done that, sir. But you are strong enough to. I reckon so, sir. Had your eye on her a long time, hadn't you, boy? No, sir, I never looked at her. Then you were mighty polite to do all that chopping and hauling for her, weren't you, boy? I was just trying to help her out, sir. That was mighty generous of you. You had chores at home after your regular work, didn't you? Yes, sir. You must have been pretty busy. Why were you so anxious to do that woman's chores? Tom Robinson hesitated, searching for an answer. Look, Looked like she didn't have anybody to help her, like I says. Mr. Gilmer smiled grimly at the jury. You're a mighty good fellow, it seems. Did all this for not one penny. Yes, sir. I felt right sorry for her. She seemed to try more than the rest of 'em. You felt sorry for her? You felt sorry for her. Mr. Gilmer seemed ready to rise to the ceiling. The witness realized his mistake and shifted uncomfortably in the chair. But the damage was done. Below us, nobody liked Tom Robinson's answer. Mr. Gilmer paused to let it sink in. Now, when you went by the house November 21st, he said, she asked you to bust up a chiffon? No, sir. She said she had something for me to do inside. She says she asked you to bust up a chiffon. Is that right? No, sir, it ain't. Then you say she's lying, boy? Atticus was on his feet, but Tom didn't need him. I don't say she's lying, Mr. Gilmer. I say she's mistaken in her mind. To the next 10 questions, as Mr. Gilmer reviewed Mayella's version of events, the witness's steady answer was that she was mistaken in her mind. Didn't Mr. Ewell run you off the place, boy? No, sir, I didn't stay long enough for him to run me off. If you had a clear conscience, why did you run so fast? Like I said before, it weren't safe for any black man to be in a fix like that. Were you scared you'd have to face up to what you did? No, sir. Scared I'd have to face up to what I didn't do. Are you being impudent to me, boy? No, sir. I didn't go to be. This was as much as I heard of Mr. Gilmer's cross-examination, because Jim made me take Dill out. For some reason, Dill had started crying and couldn't stop. Ain't you feeling good? I asked as we reached the bottom of the stairs. Come on out under the trees. Heat got you, I expect. We went out and I bought 2 Cokes, and we chose the fattest live oak and sat under it, sipping from our bottles. It was just that old Mr. Gilmer I couldn't stand, Dill said, doing him that away, talking so hateful to him. It made me sick, plain sick. He's supposed to act that way, Dill. He was cross-examining. Well, Mr. Finch didn't act that way to Mayella and old man Ewell when he cross-examined them. The way that man called him boy all the time and sneered at him and looked around at the jury every time he answered. That's just Mr. Gilmer's way, Dill. They do them all that way. Most lawyers, I mean. Mr. Finch doesn't. He's not an example, Dill. I was groping for a phrase of Miss Maudie Atkinson's. I had it. He's the same in the courtroom as he is on the public streets. Which reminded me that we were missing Mr. Gilmer's cross-examination. Come on, Dill. I said, you all right now? Yeah. Thanks for the drink. It was mighty settling. We raced back to the courthouse. Reverend Sykes had saved our seats. The courtroom was still, and Mr. Gilmer was writing on one of the yellow pads on his table. Atticus was making his speech to the jury. Absence of any corroborative evidence, this man was indicted on a capital charge and is now on trial for his life. I punched Jim. How long's he been at it? He's just gone over the evidence, Jim whispered, and we're going to win, Scout. I don't see how we can't. He's made it plain and easy as, well, you could have understood it even. We looked down again. Gentlemen, Atticus was saying, I would like to remind you that this case is not a difficult one. It requires no sifting of complicated facts, but it does require you to be sure beyond all reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the defendant. The state has not produced one iota of medical evidence that the crime Tom Robinson is charged with ever took place. It has relied instead upon the testimony of 2 witnesses. Their evidence has been called into serious question on cross-examination. It has also been flatly contradicted by the defendant. I have nothing but pity in my heart for the chief witness for the state, but my pity does not extend to her putting a man's life at stake in an effort to get rid of her own guilt. I say guilt, gentlemen, because it was guilt that motivated her. She committed no crime. She had merely broken a rigid and time-honored code of our society. She is the victim of cruel poverty and ignorance, but I cannot pity her. She is white. She is white, and she did something that in our society is unspeakable. She kissed a black man. She knew full well the enormity of her actions, but because her desires were stronger than the code she was breaking, she persisted in breaking it. Afterwards, she did something every child has done. She tried to destroy the evidence of her offense. She tried to remove her victim from the world. But her father saw her offense. What did he do? We don't know, but there is circumstantial evidence to indicate that Mayella Ewell was beaten savagely by somebody who led almost exclusively with his left. Then Mr. Ewell swore without a warrant, no doubt signing it with his left hand, and Tom Robinson now sits before you, having taken the oath with the only good hand he possesses, his right hand. And so, a quiet, respectable, humble Negro who had the temerity to feel sorry for a white woman has had to put his word against two white people's. You saw for yourselves their appearance and conduct on the stand. The state has presented them to you in the cynical confidence that their testimony would not be doubted on the assumption, the evil assumption, that all Negroes lie, that all Negroes are basically immoral, and that all Negro men are not to be trusted around our women. Gentlemen, we know this is a lie as black as Tom Robinson's skin. You know the truth. Some Negroes lie. Some Negroes are immoral. Some Negro men are not to be trusted around women, black or white. But this is a truth that applies to the human race and to no particular race of men. Atticus paused, took off his glasses, and wiped them. One more thing, gentlemen. Thomas Jefferson once said that all men are created equal, a phrase that the Yankees and the distaff side of the executive branch in Washington are fond of hurling at us. There is a tendency in this year of grace, 1935, for certain people to use this phrase out of context ridiculously. We know all men are not created equal. Some people are smarter than others. Some are born gifted beyond the normal scope of most men. But there is one institution in this country in which all men are created equal. That institution, gentlemen, is a court. Our courts have their faults, but in this country, in our courts, all men are created equal. But, gentlemen, any court is only as sound as its jury, and a jury is only as sound as the men who make it up. I am confident that you gentlemen will review without passion the evidence you have heard, come to a decision, and restore this defendant to his family. In the name of God, do your duty. Atticus's voice dropped, and he turned away from the jury. Dill suddenly reached over me and tugged at Jim. Look yonder. We followed his finger with sinking hearts. Calpurnia was making her way up the middle aisle, walking straight toward Atticus.